So a little bit about me and our organization. I've kind of been working in senior living and aging services, or whatever you want to call it, probably since the great flood of Noah, it feels like at this point. But it's been about 30 years I've been involved in this field. And during that period of time, I've worked for a lot of different organizations. I've been the CEO of single-site organizations. I've also been executive directors and am now chief operating officer of a multi-site organization. I've been through a lot of different versions of rebranding, and so happy to share with you our experience about going from Episcopal Homes Foundation in 1965 to Episcopal Senior Communities to now Covia. I threw up on the beginning of this slide this brand. This is actually right here where we are today. The mission here in Santa Barbara used to run about 300,000 heads of cattle in the late 1800s, and that was their brand. And it's kind of funny, now it seems so obvious. Can anybody figure out what that might be as a picture? Kind of a tree. There's no historical reference to say exactly what it is, but it sure to me looks like a grapevine and the setting sun, which kind of makes sense for Santa Barbara because we've always grown wine here and the sun goes down, but they're not really sure what that stands for. But as you know, a brand and the way we use branding comes from that concept of branding cattle to declare ownership, and it's gotten much greater than that. And so you might already know this, and I know that if you work in sales and marketing, you do know this. Brand is often sort of in lay terms considered to be the logo or the word mark, and that's the obvious visual representation of a brand. But branding itself is much deeper and much richer than that as a process. I've been a part of rebrands where that's all we did was change the logo. And that does bring new life, new intentionality, sometimes new personality to an organization. But that isn't really deep enough to really do a full rebrand. There's other visual pieces that go along with that. Often there's color, there's typeface. You can do brand architecture, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Even the way that you do images and style, like the Point Click Care video or presentation earlier today was a great example of how they wove the images were all light with white background, their slides were all light with white background, and you see their corporate colors throughout compared to the ones from Nick, which were just a very different visual effect. So, all of those things go into the visuals, but what really makes a brand authentic are the intangibles. The personality and the voice when you communicate, either verbally or in writing. Do you have a playful tone? Do you have a serious tone? Do you have an over-intelligent tone? Do you use a lot of 50-cent words, or do you dumb it down? How do you communicate to your audiences and have consistency about that? The behaviors of the organization, the way you make decisions, the way you handle mistakes. When things go really well, how do you celebrate? The way that you contract with your residents, the way you work with your employees, the way you work with your vendor partners, all of those things go into the behaviors of an organization. And lastly, the standards that you set for yourself and the culture that you keep. All of those things go really into a very consistent brand. And at the end of the day, the brand is the personalization of the organization. Each one of us has a parallel to that brand. It's who we are as a person. I know Janelle, I've known her for a long time. When I meet with her, I know what to expect. I know how we're going to communicate, and the conversations we've had are very consistent year after year after year. That's her brand. We all as an organization have the same personality as well. How do you see yourself? How do your internal stakeholders see you? How do your external stakeholders see you? All of that becomes an ethos or a personality that is a singular representation of your organization. And if it's fractured, then it breaks trust with your stakeholders. If it's consistent, then it's considered authentic, and that's where you get some real strength from your brand. So I'm going to walk you through some of the things that our organization did in just a minute. These are I mentioned brand architecture, and there's a lot of different ways that brands can be structured in a larger system. Here on the left, you see FedEx does what's called a branded house, where you can see very clearly their logo. FedEx is in front of everything else. Their express, their ground, their freight, their trade networks, and the only thing that changes is that color of the EX. You can tell immediately when you see FedEx Office, even if you don't know light blue is their color for FedEx Office, you know it's FedEx and you immediately connect it to the master brand, the Federal Express. I don't know why they say FedEx Express, but they do. But that's, that is their brand. And so a branded house has a very consistent visual representation all the way through all the different service lines and product lines and subsidiaries that they have. Looking at sub-brands, Apple does this pretty uniquely. They use the logo, the Apple logo consistently, but Apple and iPhone really becomes its own brand. You think about Apple TV, you don't necessarily see that it's connected, except for that little Apple logo connected to their MacBooks or their iPads or their iPhones. It's very subtle, very connected, and in some ways they're boosting each other. They continue to support the brand hierarchy, but they each have their own identity. An endorsed brand, and Marriott's here today. In fact, he's speaking in the other room. I was pretty excited to see how he put together his brands, but these are just one of their little brands that he talked about their architecture earlier, but you can see how there's a consistency. And underneath each one, I don't know if you can tell in this, but it says Courtyard, and then the Marriott logo is like a sub portion of that. But there's still Courtyard is a separate brand. Spring Hill Suites is a separate brand. The Residence Inn are a separate brand. And as we saw today, their Sheridan brand is separate, and it has its own unique flavor, but it's connected to the master brand through an endorsement underneath it or on the side that says, oh, this is part of the Marriott family. Then you get to Procter & Gamble, and all of their subsidiary products have their own logo, their own personality, their own brand, and none of them endorse back up or connect back up to the master brand. In fact, I wouldn't know that Head & Shoulders is part of Procter & Gamble unless I read the little, fine print on the very back of the bottle. So they're very unique. They all stand on their own, and they don't necessarily contribute to the success of the other. So those are different ways to do branding. For us, we started out life, and honestly, we've long since lost our first logo. We have no visual record of it at all. But in the 1990s, this was our first sort of, I think, really stylized logo. I think we had probably a word mark that was a specific font for Episcopal Homes Foundation, but this is the first time we really put together some visualizations. And being in the Bay Area, and we're connected through a geography that's very consistent from Pacific Grove and Monterey in the south to Sonoma in the north. We also have always had a lot of different lines of mission work that we've done. We've done life plans, CCRCs. We've done affordable senior communities. We have a lot of diversity in our organization. And so, all the different colors weren't necessarily specified to one line of business or another, but the idea was to say, this is a collective of different things all under one umbrella, Episcopal Homes Foundation. But then in the 2000s, we came up with a very huge change in our visual brand. You can see it here. We renamed the organization in 2011 Episcopal Senior Communities, and we were bold. We turned all those little squares on their edge so they became diamonds. We didn't even change the colors. And we changed from, instead of a Homes Foundation, we became Episcopal Senior Communities, which was, we weren't really focused on the foundation aspect of our work anymore. We're really more in community operations. So this served us very well and was a fairly well-recognized brand throughout at least the West Coast Senior Living Organization from 2011 until last year when we did a complete rebrand. And the reason that we did that was, as we start here with the 2011 logo, you can see that we also had, let's see if they show up, a lot of different subsidiary marks, because we had been collecting and affiliating and merging and opening and launching, and every time we did something new, we had the beautiful idea of giving it its own name and its own logo. And only one there that even represents that Episcopal Senior Communities is our Episcopal Senior Communities Foundation logo, but all the rest are crazy. And you look at, these are our life plan communities, and you start to see, okay, there's some consistencies there. They have that wood block print, And you can tell that maybe they're part of the same family. You couldn't tell what family they're a part of, but they sort of go together. And then we have our affordable communities, also wood blocks, but they're affordable, so they should be simpler, right? They shouldn't have sophisticated. It was so stupid of us to do that. Why would we ever talk down about or even represent down our affordable communities? But we did, very childish, representations of the more sophisticated life plan community blocks. We had our foundation, which I mentioned a bit ago. And then this is sort of everything else that we did. JTM, that was, those initials stand for John Tennant Memorial, which was a memorial established in memory of John Tennant, who was an early part of our organization, but that name sort of lived on and lived on and lived on. Eventually, we rebranded JTM Communities as Senior Resources of the West, which was not related at all to Episcopal Senior Communities, visually at all. But you can see that resources and seniors sort of carried out with some of the other work we did in community services. And all the way over here at the end, we started a home care agency and gave it the same visual print as our Spring Lake Village logo. So we reused the logo block and gave it a new name. And the real secret sauce to our success was having a website and an email address that made total sense, that was easy to tell people, that was easy for people to get right the first time. It was ridiculous, and it was all done with great intentions, but no planning. So we had become somewhat by accident, I would say, a house of brands where we were this collection of things that didn't relate to each other. They didn't connect to each other. When something went really well on our senior resources program, it didn't reflect on our life plan communities. And when things were going really well in our life plan communities, it didn't reflect at all on our affordable housing communities. And so we weren't getting any credit. We weren't having any sort of collateral benefit or scaled success under this brand structure. And as a result, quite honestly, internally, we had those same fractions in our own organization in different silos. I'm working in life plan communities. I'm working in community services. I'm working in affordable housing. But we didn't have that sense of being a part of the same team either, because we didn't have the same jersey. We didn't have the same representation at all from one to the other, and that was part of our culture. So when we rebranded, we became Covia, 2018. So just a year ago. Covia is an invented word, and it is taken from two sort of components of words. Co, meaning together, like community, collaboration. Via, if you were in a Spanish-speaking world, means path or way. It's very close to the word life in French, vie. So we got to tell the story about this name and this word, and we say it means together on the path of life. Totally made it up, but it actually allowed us to tell a unique story. And the mark we wanted to go with it, we see a home and a little window and the dormer, and some overlapping colors that give a little bit of depth to the multiple things that we do. But that's just a pretty picture, and we tell that story, but that's how we tell it. But it allowed us to begin to put our family together in a way that we'd never been put together before in the past. These are now the logo, the visual representations of our life plan communities, the same two, San Francisco Towers and Canterbury Woods. Now you can tell that they kind of relate to each other, and you can also tell, that they are a part of our family. We even say, oh, this is a Covia life plan community. Oh, this is a Covia community. In our affordable housing communities, the same sophistication that we have in our life plan communities as well, but they're in a Covia affordable community. Our foundation also looks very similar, and these are some of our other programs, which we took the opportunity to rebrand in a way that connected them very nicely with our overall master brand. So we did this very intentionally, and the outcome of it was that it wasn't all that expensive for us to do this, because we didn't go out, and I just was talking with one of the vendor partners here about, we haven't ever done outdoor signage updates since we did this. We left the names on the original communities still there, but this is all digital now. So everything that we talk about is digital. We did some print pieces just to have something to hand out to talk about the name change, but really everything was related to a new website. And as you can imagine, our email addresses now are rschaefer@covia.org, or our website is www.covia.org. So much simpler than the dashes and weird sort of three-letter acronyms. So in going through that process, I just wanted to highlight that because there were some challenges that we ran into, and quite honestly, the hardest one, which I never would have guessed was coming up with a new name. Literally every word in the English language that you might want to call your company, if you don't already own the website, the URL for it, you're not going to get it. So unless you want to name your company Turpentine or something that isn't really desirable, you're really in a bad spot. So coming up with that was really our biggest challenge, and it took us a while of going around the mulberry bush for months and months, and we came up with hundreds of names to really consider. We ended up deciding to create a word because we felt we could tell a better story that way. And I also realized, for me, I realized why every new drug, every new product, every new organization has a really funky name. Tangerine, what does it mean? I don't know, but it sounds like it's technology. But that's because all those words are gone already. So that was, if you're considering going through a rebranding effort, that is a huge challenge. And start early, get a great consultant to help you work through that. I know that there might be people in this room who can help with that, but I'm not promoting them officially. But having a good consultant to help you work that, because it's so easy to end up in dead ends and corners that don't make sense, and then you start making bad choices, which doesn't help anybody. So having somebody who really has external perspective, who can say, this makes sense, this has some other connotations to stay away from, that would be my advice to you in going through this process. But I'll tell you that for us, the biggest success that we had was, for the first time in the 54-year history of our organization, we are now a single company, and everything that we do supports each other. Everything that goes well relates and reflects back. If there's a problem, we manage it globally. We're building that brand of how we respond to bad news if it happens. We talk about being a part of the same team now, and everybody has a Covia email address. Everybody is a part of the Covia family. And internal stakeholders, our employees, our board members, for the first time, we're starting to look at us as a complete organization. Really wall to wall, corner to corner, global perspective of who we are and what we do. And that the language was so important. We did not understand how fractured we were under multiple brands. So with that, I know I was just supposed to speak for a minute. It's time for open discussion. I just want to say, if you're in this room, hopefully it's because you've gone through a rebranding and you want to share your ideas, or if you're considering it, this is a good time to get together with the people at your tables. And if you're sitting in the seats, it's time to come up and pick a lane, pick a table, please. That means standing up. Up, yeah. I could levitate you there, but I left my wand of elders at home. But please feel free to have the conversations. If your conversations start to stall out at all, I've left 3 possible prompts for you to think about. These aren't required. This is just in case you feel like you're not getting your value out of the rest of the hour, rest of the 40 minutes we have here. So, but with that, I think we're going to have our table discussion. Any questions? Yeah.
Did you find any? I noticed you have a broad spectrum from your affordable housing. I'm sure maybe some very high end. Did you find any of it coming back to you that maybe you were bringing some of that expectation down at high end only because it's grouped in possibly with some of your charitable care, things like that? Did you find any of that negative?
No, not that way. The negative we got from some of our more affluent residents was that they didn't trust the name change because we were moving away from the church name into something that felt very generic, and they would say for-profit, which is not what they were expecting when they signed in. So it took us a while to convince them, same management team, same board of directors, same governance structure, same corporate structure, just a new name. And it took them a while to really trust that that was the case. So, I mean, that's change management, and it's communicate why all the time. But We did not have people say, oh, I don't want to be affiliated now with that lower end product, or I don't want my service dollars to go to support that. We didn't have that issue. We always had those conversations all the way along. So,
did you see an impact with your affinity group, with the name change, with kind of separating from the Episcopalian affinity group? Has that reduced your percentage of new residents that are Episcopalian?
No, that's a good question, but no, we didn't really see a change in our Episcopal marketing. We haven't seen any drop in marketing at all. In fact, we've seen some of our communities that were struggling to perform really begin to pop up this year since we've done that. And I'm not going to say that's entirely due to this. I think our focus as an organization, which is a byproduct of this, is what contributed to that success, more than the name change itself. We are more recognized. Once you hear the story too, it makes sense, and so people have something more memorable to remember than Episcopal senior communities. We were aware that there may have been people coming to us because we had Episcopal in the name, but our organization internally hasn't changed. So we still have the same relationship with the church that we had before. Yeah.
Do you own any ancillary businesses, any home health, hospice?
We don't. We have about $3.5 million a year in what we call community service programs, and some of those are grant supported, some of those are operating dollar supported. But we don't do any that would be considered healthcare oriented. They're all aimed at social isolation, food desert alleviation, that type of stuff. So it's more money out rather than revenue.
I ask because we own a large home health, large hospice, large rehab company. In return, I think a lot of fragmentation with us, what hurts us, is the fact that we try to brand it as independent, because they always come back and say, well, some of your competitors will not use us if they know that they're part of you. I'm like, everyone already knows that you're part of us. So I've always kind of pushed for branding across the whole entire family of companies to be like this, and so that's the reason I asked the question, to see if you had an experience with that.
We did start and launch a home care program company and ended up selling it because it just wasn't our competency, and we recognize that, so now we partner for that. So we did have that, sold it. I think we do live in a world where people are a little suspicious of big business, and yet that we also live in a world where some people find great comfort in the stability of big business. So it may mean, how do you find your market within those different, I look at Brookdale and my gosh, they just kill it every year, it seems like, and they're huge. I mean, they just are big. So it's hard to argue that everybody wants small boutique, but on the other hand, small boutique really works. There's a small boutique community about 3 miles from here called Casa Dorinda that is just crushing it year after year as a single site, standalone community. So I don't know that this changed any of those relationships for us. Again, it made us so much more focused and so internally more focused, more global in our perspective of our business. So I think we're running our business better as a result of just changing our frame of reference, which we were all fairly smart people before. You wouldn't think it would have been that big of a deal, but it was. Yeah, Jack.
This may be a little bit off topic, but I'm just curious, when you're going through this, if you went through any analysis of the word senior, just the whole connotation of senior.
Yes, we did. We talked about senior, we talked about age. There's a lot of people that are adding age to the end of their name when they're creating new names, and we went through all of that, and at the end of the day, we just said, that feels like it's so time contextually sensitive, like what is good today and what might seem like it's safe territory today might not be safe territory in 10 years. So we chose to step out and go a different direction. We didn't intentionally say we've got to get senior out of our name, but that's where we ended up.
But as far as, I'm just like in some of your promotional, how you're sub-describing who you serve.
We do use senior. We don't use elder. We use senior in our marketing and in our website. But we prefer residents. We prefer our people, living in our homes. So we do try to make it very normalized to normal human activity, not specialized for seniors. But when we do need to use a word, I think senior is the word that we use. Yeah.
What's your thought process when you went through this was thinking about the community level and the branding of the community versus your corporate structure and your business partners in that? It's two different audiences that you're selling to. You're selling your business to your business relationship versus the residents. You kept the names and then I'm just curious your thought process with that.
So we wanted to have continuity at a corporate level. So that mark, the house mark is what we absolutely felt needed to be represented everywhere. But within that, each of our communities were very insistent is a local community with its own particular market strengths, market position. So even on our website, if you go from community to community, you'll see a very different write-up of what that community is about. And we try to reflect the local broader community as much as we can. So in San Francisco, it's much more about, uptown living. You get to Canterbury Woods and Pacific Grove, it's about this small little beach community that's everybody knows everybody. So we tried to separate it out that way, and in our marketing, when we talk about each community, we try to be talking specifically about that community and we never go, here is this year's ads. So we're just going to substitute your community name over that. We do, everyone is very custom, I would say bespoke in that way to that community.
Did I understand you correctly when you said that when you rolled this out, your individual buildings and the individual markets kept their original signage?
For now, yes.
For now. So I guess my question to that is, as you're talking specifically about Canterbury being one thing and Uptown being another thing, are you taking that brand and putting that in all of your collateral material, and do you have the intention of changing all of your exterior signage and everything with that logo?
Yes, we do. Good questions. But we went into this and said we felt that the digital space and the more the limited print that we do would be a better place for us to put the money, because that's what more people see more frequently and visual, or monument signs people see once, but once they know where it's at, they just blindly go through and don't notice them. So we thought we'd save our money for that later.
Do you find that you might not know with this being a newer project, but do you find that there's potentially, at least initially, some disconnect of, okay, I've seen this online, I've seen this brand, and then I pull up to a building and I don't see that brand, and so I don't necessarily, like, you experience that you got disconnect at this point?
We haven't had any feedback to that effect. Yeah, we just haven't. And because we've always put the name of the community, St. Paul's Towers or Los Gatos Meadows, as front and center. If they don't see the Covia mark, but they see the building name, at least it's still there. And it didn't have the old logo on it either. It just had the community name. So what's missing is the new logo.
Just
Yeah.
quick question. I think I heard you talk about the affordability factor as different levels of care provided, more on the eliteness of the business versus ones that are more affordable, and combining the two. We've gone one more step and we formed a nonprofit corporation as well. So we have 3 companies.
Oh.
And we're nervous about joining them together because the elite communities are a little bit more of a snob appeal.
Now, yeah, I get it.
They're concerned that maybe they're paying more than they should based on the fact that there's other.
Really? We don't get that at all. We don't ever get residents think that they're overpaying just because they're in the more expensive zip code. Not a bit. No. We didn't have more of those challenges after the rebranding than we had before. Obviously, those conversations happen. Our executive team goes to each community twice a year, and we stand up there and put on our armor and take all the questions that can come up, and they're always critical, and that invariably comes up at our highest market value communities is, why are you spending my money, blah, blah, blah. The good news is that our affordable communities, quite honestly, we can say, are self-funding. We don't have to contribute direct money in. There is some management that goes to that, but we allocate that, and it holds its own. So there isn't a lot of substance to those criticisms. We actually get more criticism because of the community services that I mentioned that we put out. About $2.5 million of our dollars in community services and fundraise another $1 million from grants, and they get really uptight about that. But that was going on long before we rebranded.
I can see how your Covia idea made sense because you're combining a lot of different concepts. And so Covia, to the public, when you see it digitally, you don't really assemble anything in terms of what you're really marketing for senior housing. But if you have a name that has something that relates to seniors, and there's guidelines as to how far you can take that, in terms of where you can expand that brand and still have it make sense. So we've gone out of the way lately, and now we start competing with deliveries of our food services to the community, the surrounding community. So we now have our commercial kitchens going beyond just serving the public. Within our building, we serve the public outside of the building. And that seemed to cross the line a little bit in terms of the brand.
So picking your brand architecture is really important. When you look at the structure and depth and breadth of what you do, if everything can't fit under a single brand very cleanly, you may need to go to a different kind of endorsement, or at least for portions of what you do, so that there is a visual and public separation from this business to that business. The question is, if you want to see the value of having that scale of all those people seeing one line of business, also learning and getting a sense of who you are as your other business, you've got to have something that connects the two. And it has to be pretty easy for people to pick up on. Otherwise, they really are independent businesses that grow and ebb and flow independently. But if you want to have that scale effect, there needs to be some sort of attribution or some visual mark that allows people to see that. But picking your brand architecture, again, I would go back and say, find a good consultant that can help you with this. There are many of them out there, and they're pretty smart people. Yeah.
When you rebranded, did you keep it, did you guys have one overall Covia website, one URL, or do they all have separate websites? How does that work?
They all fall under covia.org, and so there's an architecture there, but you don't have to go to covia.org to get to them. So when we promote St. Paul's Towers, we will promote the St. Paul's Towers page within that. So that it's easy to do. And in today's world, I mean, if you can get stpaulstowers.org and have it just sort of link back directly into your master website, that's fine. And sometimes that can happen very nicely. But they're all under the same website, not the web page, but the website. Yeah. Good questions. Yeah, one more.
As far as rolling this out, I assume you decided on a launch date to, redirect websites, everybody changed their email, you kind of choose a day. Did you do any kind of education to existing families? So they knew if they went to go pay a bill and all of a sudden they're hitting?
Yeah, we started our communication campaign about 6 weeks before we went live with any of the digital presence. So before the website, before the email all went live, we started about 6 weeks before. We did a roadshow with all of our communities. We sent out written information to residents, to employees, to the family members who were on the responsible party list. So our residents who are in higher levels of care that are more reliant on their family to help make those decisions. We went to those families. We went to licensing. We went to, we changed our whole name. So there's a whole legal structure that goes along with it. But all of that started weeks before. The legal stuff actually started well before that, but the public campaign was about 6 weeks before we launched. All right, so this isn't supposed to be Q&A the whole time with me, so I'm going to let you guys talk at your tables, but if you have any other questions, I'll be here, so thank you very much.